the Right Honourable Mr. P.H. Arvind Pandian, Additional Advocate General of the High Court of Chennai. We have lost the professor. So, Honourable Judges, Mr. Saravanan, Chairman of the Council for National and International Commercial Arbitration, Mr. Anand, Secretary of CNICA, and then Mr. Ashok Pati, Treasurer of CNICA, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and I take a particular, I would like to recognize Mr. Ganesh Chandru. When Mr. Pandian is talking about Singapore, it is the muscle and bones that actually make the centers outside of India strong, and Mr. Ganesh is one of them for SIAC. So can we just recognize? Please stand up, Mr. Ganesh. Can you stand up? Yeah, so it's very, very interesting that today I had this amazing and humbling experience of being asked to launch this new center, and I went to the premises. It's very well equipped, very well done, and it's something that I'm very proud to be part of. And more importantly, is it because I'm actually my great grandparents are actually from Tamil Nadu, so there's like a homecoming in many ways. And I feel that we can achieve quite a bit. I did talk about the muscle and bones of the international arbitration centers, that if you go to any center around the world, particularly in the West and in Asia, provided it's not Chinese speaking only, you will find there are Indian nationals working there. My deputy in my center is actually Indian from Chennai, and then Mr. Ganesh, I think, propelled the market share that SIAC has in India, together with A.J. Thomas and a number of his compatriots. And one of the things that I also find is one of the greatest export of India, while you have it here in India, is actually human resource. The quality of human resource is amazing. I don't know what the professor was talking about, the quality of the teaching, but I think the lawyers that we get are very, very good, and they are comparable to anywhere in the world. But I think it's because of the element of competition, which is so demanding here, that a person who actually makes it to the university is of some caliber, even if he comes from a very humble background, or she comes from a very humble background. Now, I've been asked to address the topic, the growth of institutional arbitration across the world, and this is actually quite pertinent, simply because we are talking about a new institution that's been opened today, and it is quite important for us to understand what arbitral institutions do, and what is the market they serve, what is the ecosystem and environment they are in. And it's also important for new entrants like CNICA, and old players like ICC. For example, in Asia, this is actually our century. We are very lucky. I think I'm still lucky to be alive, looking at this century when we are coming to the fore. I think last century was called the American century, but this century is actually the Asian century. The coming together of Asia as an economic power, the coming together of Asia as a political power, and I think more importantly, the coming together of Asia as the most populous region in the world. So I think that already by itself is a cause for celebration. But we need to harness the potential. And when we talk about arbitration, it cannot be arbitration per se. There are two types of arbitration that's going on. One, I think, we must never neglect, while we talk about international commercial arbitration, we must never neglect domestic arbitration. I think I think sometimes the analysis may go wrong there. If you start to neglect domestic arbitration, you will never make it to international arbitration. Simply because the real hinterland of what you do will be at home, where you are. And that is why CNICA for me is quite important. It is actually located in Chennai. It is actually run by local people, practitioners who understand the business, and it's set up as a trust, and it is to provide service. And I think it serves essentially the domestic market. So I think take it from there, take it from me that when I started the KLRCA in 2010, in the sense that when I say started, I was telling Anand as I was coming here, and maybe Saravanan also, that for 30 years we had 22 cases. We were founded in 1978 as an ALCO center. And ALCO is the Asian African Legal Consultative Organization, which is based in New Delhi, which is an international organization of 47 countries. And ALCO decided to set up a number of arbitral centers. They call it the regional arbitrators centers. I don't understand until now why they didn't set up one in India. I couldn't figure that one out. But the first one that was set out was actually set up in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. The second one was in Cairo, then followed by one in Tehran, and then one in Lagos, in Nigeria, and now there's a final one in Nairobi. But the interesting thing is that when they set up these institutions, it was to institutionalize arbitration and to serve the non-aligned nations. So if you look at the world at that time, the main arbitral centers were all in the West. The only center that existed in the East, you'll be surprised, will be CTEC, which was founded in 1956, but of no use to anyone because they were communists, they were isolationists. In fact, they went through the Cultural Revolution in 1960s, and they actually only came out as a trading nation somewhere in the late 70s and early 80s. So China itself was not a player in the arbitral in the arbitral world. But if you look at the growth of China as an arbitral market, they are among the countries with the most number of arbitral institutions, which is state-based. That means every institution, arbitral institution, they call it arbitral commissions, must be supported by the government. It's either could be the federal government, which is the center government, or it will be provincial governments, or it has to be the city. So they have 230 arbitral commissions, about now 200, maybe I think they're going to 240, which exists in almost every city. I think that is actually an example of institutionalizing arbitration. Then you have the exact opposite in India. India, except for some named institutions, institutional arbitration does not exist, as far as I know. That is why I think it's quite important that people start off institutional arbitration, and with the latest reforms that have been proposed under the, I think I came for that conference and spoke at it, what is called Nati Ayo, is it? Yeah, and I spoke to the Judge Manmohan, who was actually organizing the thing, and it was very interesting that the immediate reaction to say that we must actually go international commercial arbitration. That is a different ball game. I always think it's a different ball game, and let's talk about that around the world. No, I think first thing you must understand about international commercial arbitration is the role of the New York Convention. There are now 159 countries around the world that actually have signed the New York Convention. I think equally a large number have ratified it with or without reservations. And India has ratified it with reservations. That means it must be a reciprocal arrangement. You must recognize my award, and I must actually notify it in India. So, and therefore, that is the first impact. If you want to be an international commercial arbitration, you must actually have open recognition. Every award that actually is being arbitrated here must be able to be enforced in any of the 159 countries. That is the success, the first thing that we must consider. So I think, people who are actually looking at promoting international commercial arbitration, I think sometimes are looking at the wrong things only. They must look at first the fundamentals. International enforceability. Do you want to be part of it? Do you agree to allow every award that is made in India, seat is India, that means seat of arbitration, lex arbitri, that award will be enforced in any other country, and the same thing, you must allow all the awards that are made overseas to be enforced quite easily in India. I think that's the first prerequisite for the growth of international commercial arbitration. I don't know whether it can be done in India. I'm not sure. Because if you look at the manner it was rectified, the reservations is actually limiting. So in actual fact, India will only recognize maybe about 40 countries. So if you are doing business with the world, it is quite difficult to actually convince people to arbitrate in your venue. You can set up a beautiful center, have all the facilities, and then people will be quite concerned whether first they can actually get their award enforced, because there's no recognition. And you also must be, I think that's the success of those countries that actually Paris, Singapore, even Malaysia, Hong Kong, is the universal. In fact, we had some concerns. I think China had some concerns because they couldn't enforce their awards in India. So I think there was a problem. So I think everybody agrees that international commercial arbitration is very, very important only if you can enforce it. If you cannot enforce it, then you cannot discuss very much about it. Now, I think the other thing is that the preference for arbitral institutions. Though, when you set up an arbitral institution, I think I've gone through that process of setting up arbitral institutions and setting up new institutions. In fact, when I took over in 2010 in Malaysia, we had a center that was moribund. It's almost like dead. And then I remember Ganesh Chandru is actually actively working away in Singapore. And 78 SIAC started in 1991. Hong Kong International Arbitration Center started in 1986. So when you look at their trajectory, you can see they did certain things. So I will talk about some of the things that they did, and we will see how there are two parts to what arbitral institutions. But first thing, I think, again, Mr. Pandian, I agree with you. It is about location and facilities. You will look at some of the places that are very successful international commercial arbitration and institutionalizing it. First thing is their location. Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Paris, London. These are the players now. Then facilities. It's actually, I think, the facilities that actually captured the imagination of all of us as a facility is strangely Singapore with Maxwell Chambers. Then, of course, now my center is a bigger facility than ever. Then everybody actually started upgrade facilities. But more than facilities, you need to be located in the right place. And I agree, as far as I see, Chennai is in the right place. Chennai is actually, there's not an issue of being not located. Actually, there are two types of location. It depends what you do. One location is being strategically located between countries. The other location is being strategically located in economic zones. And I think Chennai is strategically located in an economic zone. That is the game. So if you look, the route that goes from the world across, you will find that you actually have to either hit Sri Lanka or you have to hit India, and the best place to hit is actually to stop at Chennai, whichever way the route goes. So I think that's the second. That's the first thing. So it's location and facilities. Facilities is not a problem. You can create, I think that's the easiest thing to do. All you have to do is that if somebody wants to actually set up a facility, it is the easiest thing to do, because you just get a piece of land, or you go and get a building, you get an architect, you get some budget, you renovate, and you just put your things up. So easy to do. That's the easiest. In fact, when people ask me, oh, your building is very nice, I always say that is the easiest thing. The real difficulty is the ecosystem that comes along. And the next thing to institutionalize arbitration is you must know who are the people who are going to use you. So basically, when you do that, you need to look at specific industries. And nowadays, you find that arbitration is actually, there are a lot of specialty arbitrations. Commercial arbitration, construction will never go away. Commercial arbitration will be there. But there are new things coming up. Sports arbitration, domain name, which it doesn't need borders. Then you have maritime. It keeps on going. And then more importantly, the real game player, again, whether you want to institutionalize it or not, is investment arbitration. And investment arbitration will be only located in two places, no matter how hard you try. It's going to be the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, or it is going to be ITSIC in Washington. It cannot be anything else, simply because even if we try, Singapore is trying very hard, everybody is trying, and even I am trying very hard, we will not get that kind of traction. Because it is a structural arrangement, which is a worldwide arrangement of economic power. So from the Bretton Woods, with World Bank and all these things were set up, the ITSIC system was set up. Same with the PCA, people look at the PCA alternative. And if you look at the various bids and you look at the FTAs, the multi-trade agreements, you will find that all these contain only the prominent centers. The only center that, now I'm very lucky that I have my center named in the ASEAN Comprehensive Agreement. That's all. That means countries itself, when you negotiate politically to do business, you will have to actually, when you negotiate trade treaties, you will have to be conscious to put, and there will always be a reaction if you put something small. Okay? I think that's the other thing is that sometimes you need to also look at markets in another way. Like Malaysia, what we did is, because there's a very large Muslim population, we do bonds and what we call Islamic finance. We set up what is called the arbitration rule. So you must have specific products that you may have to do that. The next thing is that, Mr. Pandian, you talked about it, rules. You must have institutional rules, and the problem basically, if you devise your own set of rules, nobody may want to recognize it, because they get very nervous, especially small institutions. You find, I don't know whether you have Institute of Architects here and engineers actually devising their own arbitration rules, and trying to promote their rules for use by the institution, and they actually have arbitrators being appointed, you'll find that those rules could be quite parochial. But on the other hand, if you go to an international organization, you will find that most of them will model their rules on UNCITRAL or something that is similar. The rules of arbitration are very similar to an arbitration act. They will have how to commence, how to actually appoint, and then how do the proceedings will be conducted, and then how will costs be dealt with, interest, and all these things, and then including when they talk about proceedings, the idea of delivery of statement of case, defense, and all these things. So all these rules will have all these basic things inside there. But again, if you do the rules wrongly, institutional rules that are not properly done, you will find that there will be, all you need is some bad publicity. One bad publicity, the rules don't work, it will just spread like, even if 100 times it works, the one bad time it doesn't work, everybody will talk about that one. So I think that is also very important. And again, what is best practice? If you have a small center, then you have to look at who is your customers and do the best practice there. But if you have a big center with very big ambitions, then you have to do something that is universally accepted. There is always a lot of complaint about cost and time. Let me tell you all, I sat in the Indian arbitration as wingman. I took 5 years to finish. I mean, ad hoc arbitration. I'm not complaining. I was handsomely paid. But the thing is that but it took too long, and I had to come over to Mumbai many times, which I enjoyed very much. I always stay at the Oberoi and have a good meal. I get my best meal, and then the hours are not very long. I'm just talking about and then I'm doing, let's say, one in Hong Kong now. Expedited procedure. We have to finish everything in 6 months. No hearing. Everything on documents. I'm chairing it now. So I'm doing it, and I feel the pressure. Basically is that and everybody is feeling the pressure. Not only the arbitral tribunal, the councils, the parties, I think even the arbitral institution, because we have an absolute stop of 6 months to finish and deliver an award. Then we have the new reforms that came in a couple of years ago in India, which is very interesting. It was quite radical. For me, I thought it was amazing. After sitting in an arbitration for 5 years, then suddenly somebody comes and tells you, you've got to finish this in 12 months, and you have another 6 months extension from the parties. If not, you're going to go in stuck in the courts, which will take you 5 years. So I think it's very interesting. I'm chairing another panel, where it involves the Indian Arbitration Act, and we are so conscious. To be very clear about it, we are very, very conscious because of this legislative requirement that we will finish it in a year. And I think everybody is pushed. Nobody is saying, no, I won't do. Only thing is that they're all feeling the pressure. Everybody is feeling the pressure. So I think time, cost, efficiency is done by two ways. One, of course, is done structurally through legislation, which India has done. The other one, you also do it in the rules. And then third thing is also you have to choose people who are not that busy, who can have the time to do the work. And institutions, let's say if you're doing scrutiny, for example, if you put scrutiny in your rules, you must make sure that you have the capacity to handle it. See, I won't complain about, but I'll just say there are some institutions, where they have scrutiny, they may take longer to do the scrutiny than writing the award by the arbitrators. So I think I'm not saying much more than that. Most probably I won't get another appointment. but so think about that. I think that's also very, very important. And of course, parties are very concerned about time and cost. And when you deal with parties, they don't know what they are getting into. most of the parties, and I think nowadays parties are getting very savvy, because they will choose a jurisdiction where it ends there. They don't want to go to a jurisdiction where it will go through multiple level of courts. For example, the arbitral tribunal is considered as an inferior tribunal. And then from the inferior tribunal, you have an appeal procedure 1, 2, 3. And the 1, 2, 3 in the court system is, if you say, how many you say, 24 million cases backlog, is it? So 24 million cases, you're actually coming on the 25th million batch you're joining in. And let's say, I'm just looking at the way that our courts work. You know, I'm not talking about Indian courts. I'm also talking about the Malaysian courts. Until we had a reformist Chief Justice, it normally took for a matter to be resolved at least about 4 years. You know, but now I think, you know, with the reforms that we have, we set up new courts, we speeded up all the things. A matter that goes to trial, a matter that is in the High Court, will be completed within 9 months. They have a KPI, what is Key Performance Index. Now, this actually is very interesting. When the courts become efficient, then they become a viable alternative to arbitration, which is expensive because you have to pay the arbitrator. You have the venue, which is not free. Then you have, because the lawyers spend more time, so it costs more. So I think many of the jurisdictions are now looking at possibly improving court procedures and speeding up the thing. That, for me, is the real competition to arbitration. The real competition is not various jurisdictions, but in your own place, how efficient the courts are. And provided the courts are competent and free of influence, I think that's very, very important. And they're actually free of influence. I think nothing is free of influence, including arbitrators. So I think you have to look at that. So I think the other thing is that, again, you know, the ability of the institution itself to manage the case. So I did talk about influence. One of the other considerations of institutional arbitration, very important, is actually the notion of impartiality and independence. The problem with many institutions, they will always say that I can get you and appointed as an arbitrator. You don't worry, somebody will be there. You know, those kind of, once that kind of whispering happens, even the best facilities you have, the center will not take off. The independence of the panel and the independence of the institution itself from interference from outside and proper standard operating procedures will be very, very important for institutional arbitration to take place. And institutional arbitration be independent from the legislature, from parliament. There is no interference from the judiciary itself. Judiciary also interferes. And then I think the bar, sometimes the bar gets influence institutions, you know. And then I think other stakeholders. The stakeholders, particularly parties, they are extremely concerned of how things are done. And they may actually interfere and do things. So I think we have to be very careful. And it is also tied back to how parties cooperate and understand their roles. Very, very important. So, and of course, now coming back to the next item for institutional arbitration is, of course, the legislative framework. It's very important. India is a very interesting place because it adopted model law very early, 1996. When you adopted model law, everybody forgot about the judiciary. Everybody thought that the model law itself will be actually sufficient in itself. We just amended our legislation. I'm under a lot of attack now from the bar and the judiciary. In fact, I was just commenting that, you know, because we abolish appeal for domestic arbitration through a question of law. We had a provision, you know, because we followed the provision although we followed model law, we had for domestic arbitrations, we had a process of appeal on a point of law when the award comes out, subject to, but the guidelines were not there. And it's fortunate or unfortunate for the parties, but fortunate for as a catalyst, is that the federal court, that's our Supreme Court, came out with a decision which was widely criticized in last year. The decision involved two things. In fact, I think they help us. First thing they did, they declared there was no pre-award interest. Arbitrators cannot issue pre-award interest. 40 years of jurisprudence went down the drain. So we all shocked. But the second one, which was more telling, was they said that they could refute any matter of point of law on the award for domestic arbitrations, and there was no sieving. So I think that actually was very useful for institutional arbitration, simply because we quickly moved to tighten the institutional rules, and more importantly, we also went to Parliament and legislated and repealed those provisions. So I think and of course I think there is always an economic interest layering when people come together, when you work, and you find that lawyers and other professionals are no different. There's always an economic interest, because the economic interest is what actually makes things work. So if you have a situation where you can appeal, you can tell your client that, okay, don't worry, even if this award is bad, you can go through this appeal process, and perhaps you will get a decision, and you will be heard, and you may get a decision that is in your favor and overturn the result. But the fact that you're going through that process itself, it churns and allows people to actually earn income. So I think that is something that has to be looked at, and I think it has to be looked at an overall level. And then, of course, you have to have people who are quite vigilant. I think I remember Singapore. This is something. You remember the Jeffrey Tan case, when the interim award was not said to be final, and the Singapore Parliament moved within a month and they amended it. But I think we took a bit longer when they decided that any question of law overcoming Ganda Oil Supreme Court decision. Then we say we cannot wait for another Supreme Court decision or a federal court decision. We have to legislate, and we took about 5 months to do it, and it was not easy. So I'm actually a marked man, walking around, still here, but I'm safe in Chennai so far. So to improve arbitration or any kind of ADR, actually arbitral institutions play two roles. One actually is what we call the private role. I talked about the private role in settling disputes. That means facilitating the settlement of disputes, getting the parties, providing the facilities and all these things. That is actually a private arrangement. There is actually a public role for institutionalization of arbitrations, where arbitral institutions will actually act as the enablers of resource development, particularly capacity building. When I talk about capacity building, a lawyer is not a lawyer until he goes through pupillage and he gets called to the bar and has a practicing cert, because before that you are an academic. You have learned knowledge academically. So if you want to be an arbitrator, even being an arbitrator practitioner, you must go through a process of learning the law. That's one thing, because very few universities, at least at my time, taught dispute resolution. They will talk about how you can go to court, how the court system works. Dispute resolution is, by the way, in civil procedure, there is such a thing called arbitration, or such a thing called mediation, but there is no full such. Of course, now the things have changed. They have full courses, especially in postgraduate levels, for ADR. But the thing is that is not good enough. It's still academic. You need to actually build capacity in terms of specialized knowledge and practical ability. And this is done by two ways. The first is that you must have actually practical courses that lead to a membership of a ADR institution. For example, the Chartered Institute, which I used to be president in 2016, not president now. But we have set up a new institution in Kuala Lumpur, which is for Asia, for 1 million ringgit my government put in for a company limited by guarantee. And it is meant for Asia, and it's called the Asian Institute of ADR. And we are, but the main thing is to allow building of capacity in terms of training, and then accrediting that training and giving a kind of recognition, a fellowship, a membership, and all these things. So I think that is a very important role by institutions. And normally you will tie back to the institutions to develop those kinds of talent. And as young people, if they do not get the thing, that kind of training, the other sort of training that has been happening very now very popular in India. In fact, Indian teams are among the best in the world. It's actually moods. Every mood you will find there's an Indian team in the finals. It's very interesting. Sometimes it's an all India final team, you know. So it's actually, I mean, these modes, Law Asia, you go to FDI mode, even Jessups, you will find Indian law schools are doing so well and creating, and I've judged on a number of modes, and I realized the skill sets are extremely high, and that is actually a very practical way of training, and normally institutions are involved in that. So I think these are some of the things. Next point, arbitration is actually a very competitive business. If you want to do international commercial arbitration, you are in trouble. I think India is in trouble if that is what you're targeting for, because it is so competitive. You must have a competitive advantage that other people don't have, which I think unless you harness your domestic market, like what China has done, you cannot get cases from outside coming in. Because if you say you want to be an international arbitration hub, then you're looking for cases coming from outside, non-Indian parties who are actually, let's say, trading with Indian parties, hear their disputes in India, and also parties like in like jurisdiction Singapore or Hong Kong, non-national parties also arbitrate there. Like in Paris, you know, like ICC and all these things. But I don't think so it can happen, you know, because it is two things that you need to look at. One, of course, is the stability of the system itself and the court system. The second, really, is the jurisprudence. If you look at the SIAC report, you will find that now about 70% of the cases are choosing Singapore law. It's quite interesting, you know. I mean, arbitration, they say we choose Singapore law, and that is why you become a service center. You say, I set up ICC court and all these things. So I think for countries like Malaysia, India and all these things, we will have to do other things. The way to do it, I feel, is a holistic approach. As you pointed out, I think even the professor, the learned professor pointed out that you should have different kinds of dispute resolution, and you should allow for it. One, of course, is that you have, for example, what we say, the interest-based dispute resolution methods, mediation, conciliation, negotiation, which is actually what we say soft, not rights-based. It's just trying to resolve the problem by not looking at the law, but looking at the party's interest. Then you have the hard process, arbitration. But it's very interesting. Arbitration now is going one step further in certain places with the International Commercial Court. Even China has set up International Commercial Court, which I'm part of the panel. You know? But Singapore has done that. I think a small place like Astana, Kazakhstan done that. So you have that already going on one side. There's one more item that can possibly look, which we have experimented in Malaysia and it's worked, and in Singapore, and it's not happened in Hong Kong, it happened in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, is actually looking at statutory adjudication for the construction industry, which is basically having a rights-based procedure on a summary basis completed within a prescribed time. If it is not completed within the prescribed time, the adjudicator does not get paid. And temporarily binding until you decide to go to court or to arbitration. It's overturned unless it's set aside or you start the process again. But it's temporarily binding. You must pay first and argue later. So I think that is one of the procedures that you can possibly look at, which will actually invigorate institutions for ADR in Malaysia, in India. In fact, I think that will serve the public's interest more than just having international commercial arbitration. So I think I want to talk about alliances. It is also very important, which is very interesting. I think that's why I'm invited here. That is, there's alliances being formed, collaborations being arranged, and more importantly, friendships and trust being built. So that we can actually share information, share common facilities, and more importantly, have this ability to work together. The ability to work together. So I think the alliances are very important. In fact, one of the structures that I've set up in my own institution is to actually enter into alliances, and so that a hearing can be held here, but the law can be there, or the hearing can be held there. The law could be here, because of the facilities and all these things. Sometimes people like to take a holiday, and get away from the place, and they want to go to somewhere that's competitive, and is reasonable, but there's some arrangement that is made. So I think that is what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to skip all these things because I'm talking off the cuff in many of the things, but I want to go to the last part. I had your former Chief Justice visiting us I think in July for the forum. Very interesting man, Mr. Deepak, Justice Deepak Mishra. Very interesting man. Very erudite, I must say. Very erudite. And I understand now he has retired. And I think he stated, in our forum, when he gave the speech, that he says that India will play a pivotal role in arbitration in the future. And I do think it is going to be a pivotal role. Provided, I think, that if the strategies are looked at in a very, very careful way, and not only look at international commercial arbitration, but also focus on the domestic era. And I think the Chennai arbitration community has to recognize its target group, has to actually create its arbitration rules, and then I think more importantly, it also must serve its real hinterland, which is basically Chennai. I think I understand is supposed to be called the Detroit of India, India, maybe of South Asia. So I think that is the real possibility of what should be kept here. And one of the things that I was asked to do when I took over in 2010, I don't know, Ganesh, I didn't tell you this, I don't know whether I told you this, is that when I met my Prime Minister, former Prime Minister is now under arrest, maybe in jail, but it's very interesting, when I saw him, when I was appointed, and when I saw him, I asked him, sir, do you have any instructions for me? I mean, appointed as director, and the center was actually dead, and I was brought in as an outsider to bring it up. He said, bring back all our domestic arbitrations, which were going out. The arbitrations that are going out is like this. It is a dispute, let's say for example, Malaysian or Indian. The lawyers are Malaysian or Indian. The arbitrator is Malaysian or Indian. But they sit, let's say, in Singapore. So that one is quite important to bring back. So I think the first focus was on bringing that back. So I think, if you want to grow institutional arbitration, of course, around the world, there are many ways of doing it. Again, you have to identify where you are. And I think one of the things that worked for us in Malaysia was this. That first thing we did is bring back the Malaysian arbitrations that were actually sitting overseas with Malaysian lawyers, with Malaysian arbitrators, but not seated in Malaysia, seated outside. So we brought that back. It's very interesting, I won't talk about Singapore's figures dropping, because Singapore's figures also dropped a little bit. But I think the main figure that really dropped vis-a-vis, and then that's why Alexi Morris starts to talk to me, is ICC. ICC is the real powerhouse of the world because they really go around getting the cases. And if you are able to do that, the first dent of the international, you see, your domestic arbitration is somebody else's international arbitration. Always remember that international arbitration by definition is coming from outside. So if it's domestic for you, then it is not international for you. But if it's going to, let's say, ICC, it is an international arbitration. So I think be careful of definitions, be very careful of the structural arrangements, and I would like to actually, again, congratulate CNICA for the successful launch of your center, and every good wishes and felicitations. And I know that Chennai, which is the home of my ancestors, will prosper, and I will keep on coming back here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an enlightening speech on various dimensions of institutional arbitration. Thank you, sir. We have almost come to the end of the session. May I now request Mr. G. Ashokpati to present a memento to Datuk Professor Sundra Rajoo as a token of gratitude. May I now request Mr. D. Anand to present a memento to Mr. P.H. Arvind Pandian as a token of gratitude. I now call upon Mr. G. Ashokpati, Treasurer, CNICA, to deliver the vote of thanks.